Is it working? Perfect. So, today we invited y'all to create a moment for some of the favorite girlies to reflect on what Trans Gurl Power has looked like through the ages and generations, and how we are coming back to our roots and reflecting on our past and where we have come from, and how we got here today. All of your shared experiences, some experiences are unique and beautiful, and which is why we have such a diverse and unique panel today. And we also have it being intergenerational because we really feel like not one generation knows everything, and that sharing the wisdom and like having wisdom from the older generation and the younger generation, and like sharing what they went through can help other folk and each other also, because we all learn something from each other. So please share your name, pronoun, where you call home, and then pass to the next person. And then after that, we'll begin with the questions. I'll go first. My name is Mulani Jackson, pronoun she, her, and I live on unceded land, Seattle, Washington. And yeah, I'll pass it to Amayas.
Hola, hello. I'm Amaya, they, them, theirs pronouns. I'm on Arapaho and Cheyenne land, also known as Denver. And I'll pass it to Kathy.
Aloha, my name is Kathy Kapua. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Native Hawaiian trans woman living on my family's land, Kanaka Maoli land, here in Hawaii. May I pass it to Christopher?
Hi, my name is Christopher Malone. My pronouns are she, they. And I currently live on Coahiltican in Tonkawa land, also known as Austin, Texas. And I'm going to pass it on to Ro. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Rose, she, her pronouns. I am currently on Duwamish land, Seattle, and I call Miami, Florida home.
Fabulous. Thank you for all sharing. I love hearing where we all coming from and what we're bringing in and the lands that we are on. I just want to acknowledge that a lot is going on in the world right now, and we could all be anywhere, but we are here sharing stories with each other, sharing wisdom with the girls, and just being together and sharing union. I want to dive into the past. We may touch on some topics that may be heavy for some. We also know that for so many of us, we may start off not in such a loving place in our life. So just feel free to skip some questions, pass, or share as much as you want. But for many trans girls' journey, the beginning towards finding home really starts with manifesting our own power, and sometimes creating our own. And I would love to hear y'all share what are your experiences with being Black and or POC femme, and how has that affected your thinking of gender? And I put the question in the chat for y'all.
I think being a brown person and being Latina, like there's such a machismo in mi cultura. And I think like growing up, there was always this like overpowering thing of being like, you need to be this way because, excuse me, because you were born a man, because you were born this way, because you have to be exactly this and nothing else. Like, I mean, my dad's family, literally women in the family, like you had to have your hair in a bun, denim dress, like, tight shirt, a black or white shirt, and you're in the kitchen cooking or you're cleaning. Like that is it, punto, nothing else, and you go to church. And so that's how I grew up seeing that. And I think I'm very lucky that my mom has always been very open and very like loving and very how do I say, just like supportive towards me and my sister. And I think it was such a dichotomy having like my dad's side of the family be this way and my mom's side kind of, well, just my mom's side, I don't, goodbye and good night. But like having that was such a weird balance, because it was like I can be myself in some instances, but I can in others. And once I finally had the opportunity to just be like, well, this is me, goodbye and good night. I don't know what you want from me except for me to be myself, because otherwise I won't be here any longer on this world. And I think like that has affected the way that I've seen gender a lot. But now I can look at the world and be like, honey, there's way too many cultures, way too much vastness, way too much beauty in gender to like limit it into that binary.
Hi, thank you for answering that question. I wanted to share mine. I come from a very far ago past, right? My birthday is on Saturday and I turned 45 years young. I'm going to celebrate it in my community at the Honolulu AIDS Walk. And for me, I realized I've come a long way. But thinking of this question, I come from a time when we didn't have Google or interwebs and all these platforms and stuff. So we had to grab our information about gender and about um, crossing genders and even learning about genders from different places. And I'll shout out some movies that we learned from Tu Wong Fu, we learned from Soldier's Girl, we learned from Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Beautiful Boxer, that Thai boxer. So in many of the situations, we see the struggle. The whole platform of those movies was about the struggle for someone who is cross-dressed or cross-gender. And it created a feeling of like it was unsafe. And being here in Hawaii on my islands, it's like we had to learn from TV. So um, Baywatch, and then they had a Hawaii person on there, then they had a Hawaii woman and a girl, a guy, and it was like they had to fit this perfect body, so this perfect image. You had to be passable. If you weren't passable, you're gonna spook them, and people are gonna be violent and against us. And those are the stories of the movies that I talked about. And even in Soldier's Girl, I remember thinking as a young person, I want to be loved. I want to find love, but I want to find love as a woman and I want to love a man. And that gender identity is for myself and for my future partner. I seen how hard it was, like in movies like Soldier's Girl, when her male partner in the military got beaten to death by his platoon or his group in the military. And it brings sadness. And that just scared me. It made me think, oh, does that mean I won't find love? Because she was pretty. She already was passable, but yet people found out and they didn't like it. So that ideas of gender and femininity really crossed into my world. I transitioned later. I transitioned when I was 18 years old. And at that moment, it was like, I have to go all the way passable, otherwise don't come out. Like that fear was in me that I have to be really soft and talk really high, and I have to make small because I'm 5'11". I cannot be more than 5'7". You know, my feet, I would never find shoes my size. So this idea of femininity was really difficult to grasp. And even fashion, right? I love fashion. Tu Wong Fu and RuPaul's Drag Race. When they had shows of RuPaul, I was like, wow, they found shoes their size. They got makeup. They got the wigs that it don't slip. You know, I'm like, what is all that? And I was trying to learn, and I was like, oh, it's a Hollywood thing. You gotta be, you gotta have tons of money to buy $1,000 wig that can get glued on. And I was like, oh, what's that? Where do I get that? How come I don't have access to these things? So all in short, I just say like living on an island, living in my rural communities with indigenous folks back in the 80s and 90s. We struggled. We figured out ways how to be feminine. And lastly, I'll say that we had to run in packs. We had to be together. Sisterhood was everything, because when we're singled out or separated, that's when we get hurt. But when we were together as a whole, yeah, the guys may not approach us. We may not find love or get the guy's number or whatever, but at least we were safe and we had a great time doing it. So our sisterhood became really important and the glue that really held us, because we were learning together. Yeah. Thank you.
Um, so for me, finding and just thinking about gender was really difficult because Black women are just so masculinized throughout media, throughout even with Black men, with other Black women. And so Black women have to do a lot to just try and really effeminize themselves. They can't just exist in their natural existence. So like they can't have like natural hair, and they have to have long acrylics and all these different things. And so it was very hard to like see like what gender meant for me growing up. And I think there's just a lot of like masculinity within, like toxic masculinity within the Black community. And so because of that, it's like it's hard to find what you are and how you relate to gender. And so through that, I still have trouble with like seeing myself like effeminately and like just seeing myself as a girl. Like I see it inside myself, but I can't really picture it when I look in the mirror just yet, because I don't have, you know, like long wigs and, you know, acrylic nails and that sort of thing, and I don't have access to that. And so it's kind of hard just seeing yourself as a girl and defining what womanhood is to yourself, especially just growing up in the Black community, just because it's like cisgender girls are having so much trouble like trying to make themselves look like a girl. So to even think that like I as a trans girl can do that is so difficult. And it's like it feels like the flagpole is just like moving further and further no matter how much you try. And so I guess this just like a struggle that I've had to like see through and sort of really try and liberate myself from like what media and celebrities and all this other things say about what a Black woman has to be, and just try and live for myself and be comfortable with who I am, and like be comfortable with my natural hair and growing it out and that sort of thing, and just allowing me to describe and live my own effeminacy and my own definition of womanhood, and not worrying about what everything else is telling.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. I'm just taking that in because you really hit on some key points. And I just want to say thank you for everyone for sharing your truth and experiences, and how these all experiences underline the power and like of language, and knowing how it's important to like be able to like put in words how you're feeling and like who you are as a person, and also like talking about and naming finding representation within the media. Thank you. Ro and Kathy, can you speak about when you imagined what was possible for you as an adolescent, even before you found the language to affirm your identity for yourself? What or when you thought about what you were going to be when you were older, what did you imagine for yourself? Did y'all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was like, I saw I was on mute. I was like, that was on mute the whole time? Okay.
I think when I think about little Ro, right? When I think about the little girl that I was, I think about the little child that I was. I think about the many labels and titles that society and the people around me would place onto me, family wise, friends, church people, and things of that nature. And I think about the role in which they wanted me to play, and I was not performing to that role. So understanding that there's a disconnect in the way that they see me and the way that I saw myself, it was something that took me a very long time to understand, because I am the daughter of immigrants. I am the first in my family to do a lot of things, and understanding the weight that that carries. I think it's just it's a very nuanced thing to think about, because I spent so much of my life living for other people and other people's perception, and making sure that other people were comfortable with my presence around them, that I got to a point in life where it was just, I see that's what you see, but that's not what I see. And I need to let you know that at the end of the day, I have to go to sleep with myself, and I can only take care of myself. And it was really when I broke my neck that I realized that tomorrow was not promised for anyone. So it makes no sense for me to continuously to live for other people when they're not living for me, right? So these people have these preconceived notions and this just laundry list of ways in which I need to perform my gender and my identity. And because it makes them uncomfortable, it's something that they try to police. And I always say that my parents did the best that they could with what they had, right? Because I say that my parents they're great parents for a trans adult, for a trans woman, but they were not the best parents for a trans child. And that's something that I feel is very heavy for me, because I love my parents down, right? And I know that that's not the experience that a lot of trans folk have, but it's also an experience that came with a lot of conversation, difficult conversation. It's an experience that came with a lot of tear-filled conversations, a lot of hard conversations, a lot of just having conversations where you're watching your mother cry and she feels as though she didn't do the best that she could. It's a difficult conversation to have. So having those conversations and understanding that while I understand where you're coming from, and I think that's the beauty of transness. I think it's, while we understand where our families and other people are coming from, we still have the desire, the want, the need to make sure that we see ourselves, because we see ourselves in this. As a child, I saw myself in this euphoric light, right? I didn't see any of the things that people were telling me. In my mind, I completely saw someone else. When they were like, what do you want to be when you grow up? They would put all these careers on me, and all I saw was this phoenix walking into a boardroom in a pencil skirt, a pair of pumps, and a blazer. And that's all I saw. I had no clue what her job was, no clue anything. I just saw the divine feminine when I was thinking of who Ro was as an adult back then. So now as an adult, to see, I guess you could say, the full circle moment of understanding that, I'll say, the lost little child that I was. Sorry, I work right by the police station. Thank you. Understanding that that wasn't my story. You know what I mean? Like you have to find your own way. I always say life is a journey. We find our own ways, we find our story, we find our fit in places. And once you find a place that celebrates you for who you are authentically and who you know you are intrinsically, that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. I think that's what any trans individual wants, any trans woman wants, especially what Black trans women want. We just want you to, everybody actually, every human wants to be seen, and they want to be acknowledged for who they know themselves to be. So yeah.
Thank you, Ro. That's a beautiful story. I appreciate it, especially the metaphor of the phoenix walking in, and yeah, and look at you now, so beautiful and bright. I appreciate that, being a role model for folks. My story is a little different. Like, the language that was used, the way how I saw myself never aligned. And I got to create that over time. So I'll speak fast so I can talk about all the parts. But I was raised by my mother, who divorced my father. She just had me and my older sister. So it's a household of women. And I already knew what I was going to be, a woman, when I was like 3 or 4 years old. And we were raised Catholic, and my mother would always tell me that we must pray and ask for forgiveness of our sins. And then I also heard that I can ask for things that I wanted. So believe it or not, when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, I would go to bed every night and pray to wake up as a woman. I didn't know that when I was on my 42nd birthday, this would be an actual reality. So um, I say that story just to say that you don't know what you're going through, and you don't know what the future looks like, but then it eventually ends up there. But all I saw was the supermodels on TV. I wanted to be like the person that I saw. I saw women, and I wanted to be a woman. I didn't know drag queens or queens. But then when I was 18 years old, I went to high school, and I all my parents said was, as long as I graduate high school, then I'm good, right? That's all they had to get me through. And I was like, okay. So after I graduated high school, I got a job at the mall and next door, and I eventually elevated and became an assistant manager. So I was like rocking it out in men's retail because I love fashion. But the store next to us was a shoe store, and a dear friend of mine who's no longer with us, but she identified as a trans woman. She performed at a drag club, and she was much older than me. And she says, "Has you never seen a drag show before?" I go, "No, what's that? Is that like the RuPaul I seen on TV?" And she's like, "Yeah, come, I'll sneak you into the club." I was 18 years old. I snuck me into the club, and my jaw dropped. I was like, "Oh, this is the answer to the prayer that I was asking for. I was asking for the answer, the light. What does it look like to wake up as a woman? You're telling me they're like me and they look like that now and they're living their best life." I was so excited. So all I saw was body, face, hair, surgery, naked on the stage performing. And all I said is, "That's what I want." And I ran towards that light. Long story short, I made a lot of decisions based off of my abilities and the things that the opportunities that was in front of me. So I ended up getting silicone injections in my face. I ended up getting hormone injections. Like I was starting running towards this light, right? I ended up also learning that people were defining me along the way. I was a young queen. I was a butch queen. I was a butch queen in drags. I was getting all these words for me, but it wasn't my language. I said I wanted to be a girl. I know I'm going to be a girl. Longer story shorter, I ended up doing sex work, lost my virginity on the streets just because I knew that that's where I need to be. This is what I got to do. They get in all this money. I need to get this money too so I can get my titties done and stuff. I ended up realizing I wasn't going to make enough money doing this. So I ended up selling drugs on the streets. I was living in my car. I was doing it all. Guess what? At 20 years old, I was a bad drug dealer because I didn't last 6 months. 20 years old, I got 105 years in jail. I was 20 years old. I got two 10-year terms, four 20-year terms, and one 5-year term. Put me in jail, and if they put it consecutive, I would have been 105 years locked away forever because I was just running towards my dreams and goals. Well, they gave me the Youthful Offender Act, condensed it down to an 8-year term. The most that probably could give me was 8 years. I did 5 years in a men's prison, and I was defined again. They told me I'm a queer, you know, they give me all these words that defining me, and I was like, no, I'm a woman, and I'm in a men's facility. Came out, did all these college degrees, got like 3 jobs, raised my own money. I told my parole officer, I need to go get surgeries. This is life and death surgery. So I flew over to Guadalajara, Mexico, and got me a bunch of surgeries. Facial feminization, breast augmentation, cracked my jaw, my forehead, and all that. And now people are looking at me and judging me in different ways. But you know what? I felt like I was on my way to identifying who I knew I was. I was a woman. Came back home and realized that my life and worked all these things. And I realized my path had a lot of potholes where I fell into. And I was lucky I had friends and chosen family to pull me out and tell me how to do this and be safe. I ended up volunteering at a transgender justice program who wrote to me while I was in prison. That program I volunteered at, I ended up working at, I ended up creating a I became an employment specialist doing employment work, got over 100 girls coming out of prison, jobs, sustainable livings, ways that they can earn income for themselves, and using the skills from the streets. Like I'm like not above it. Like I'm like, you learned a lot. That's just period. That's your school. You're gonna use this to further yourself. So I'm happy to say just last week, our governor here in Hawaii signed the bill that me and other trans advocates in Hawaii have been fighting for years to afford every single person with insurance, which is everybody, because even our Medicare and Medicaid programs will cover it, gender affirming surgeries. Yeah, we had transgender healthcare, but now we got gender affirming surgeries onto this list that they cannot be denied by insurance companies. Insurance companies try to block us for so long, and we finally got it signed by the governor. So now it's a law. The governor also put in place a commission of LGBT rights activists and legislators who will actually defend these laws, because we already know politicians can reverse that the next year, right? There's a whole nother person in office. They're going to take it all away. For me, that's the legacy I leave behind. That's the story. Because for me, my definition of who I wasn't defined by others. It needs to be created by myself. I'm not saying all folks need surgery, but if it's for you, And if I can avoid you falling into that same pothole that I did, then it should be afforded to you like every other person who needs healthcare. And it shouldn't be a thing that you have to check all these boxes and then you qualify, or raise all these monies and go to another country to get surgeries. You should be able to afford the life that you need to live and get all the healthcare and access to healthcare and gender affirming care that you need. So yeah, that's my story of defining myself. And I'm here now, living my best life, loving my best people. And now my definition of myself is mother, auntie, sister, friend, advocate. And that's who I define myself as. That gender role has no bearing on anything. I just need to be who I am for my people. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for highlighting how vivacious and free spirited a child's wonder can be, but also naming the gender roles and expectations that was placed upon us as youth and how we had to navigate that. This speaks to how many girls need to be how to make something out of nothing. And we do that often. And it can be rough, as we have named. But to Amayas and Topher, once you had a sense of self, of who you want to be, how did you create space for yourself? What were your support system like, if you had any?
This is so many layers, honey. I remember in 8th grade is really when I started questioning myself and I started to look into things. I was getting on the Tumblrs. I was finding all these crazy things in the world. And I was like, whoa, like now I understand myself. I found different definitions and all these things. And I was like, finally connecting the dots. And I only connected them for myself. And so I saw a vision of myself. Like I was following all these people on Instagram, like Alok, and like I was just looking up to all these people being like, one day I will be able to do this. And then I also had my sister transitioning in front of me. And so it was like, okay, I have all these people who I can connect with femhood. And then I have a sister who is experiencing womanhood and transitioning like in front of me in my own house. And it took me a couple years. And a couple years later in 10th grade, I came out. And I think before that, it was kind of, I was hiding, the heels in the closet. I was hiding the lipstick. Like I would wear lipstick at school and then I'd go into the bathroom and literally scrub it with soap before I got into my mom's car. Because I was so afraid and so scared. And so it was like, I was already finding myself. I was getting into all these things. And I think the only way I created space was finding other queer and trans people. So when I was in high school, like there were a couple other trans people and they weren't trans feminine people. So it was like a different experience in that aspect, but like we still could understand each other on a level of like transness, like baseline transness. And that's the only way I had a community. And then when I went to New York, because I moved to Tokyo and honey, I was sneaking into the clubs at 16, living my little fantasia. Like there was trans owned clubs and like, I just remember seeing all these girlies like just living life. And that was like, okay, I need to find this wherever I can. And so once I came back to the States and I went to New York to visit a friend, I was sneaking into the clubs in New York. I went to all the balls. I was walking runway at 16, just living life. And that's how I found the space and I created that space for myself because I was like, back home, like, where is it except my sister? And I think like I had to find these other avenues of expression and like love. And that was the only way, was in ballroom, was going to the club. And when I had to come back home to Colorado, like, honey, you can't sneak into the clubs here. If you try to sneak in here, honey, they will take the ID and you are running to the mills, So it's like, I had these trans friends, but they weren't experiencing trans femininity. And then I had my sister who in some ways was a support, but also sometimes, she's a binary trans woman who didn't understand being trans feminine and like the difference and also the intersections. And I think it took her a few years to finally get to a point where she was like, okay, like I understand this a lot more. And she got around, she came around. But I think because I knew myself for such a long time and I had to hide it, and it was like just itching to come out, when I finally had the opportunity, I was like rushing to every avenue that I could. And I think that's how I created that. And the only support system I really had was like my mom. And I'm really grateful for that. Of course, most people don't have that. And so, or at least for a long time. She took about 3 months, 4 months, and she finally came around to it. And literally, she is the biggest support I have now. And yeah, I mean, literally last night I was at a show and she drove me, even though she flew in from New York yesterday, like 4 a.m. She got on the flight, Zoom into work, and she took me to a show and it was super, super late. And like, I have that. And I'm so lucky that I have that. And I still do. So, yeah.
So for me, having a sense of self it was very fast and it was very like a blur. So I think I didn't really find myself. I never like had the experience of like being like an effeminate boy like in childhood. I didn't have that experience because a lot of different trauma. And so I kind of, instead of having like any effeminacy, I kind of just like basically was a shell of a person. I didn't really interact with people. I kind of just stayed to myself. I was very like lack of a personality, if you would. And so I kind of just tamed everything that I had inside me all the time. And so whenever I finally, it was in COVID and during the pandemic, in 2020, when I kind of like let myself out because I was finally like, I had space and I could just really try, and I was really reflecting during, especially during that summer of 2020. And then when I came, we had virtual school, but I connected with the different Black queer people in my school. And through that, I kind of slowly like realized who I was and realized that I was trans. And then I had basically the entire year between fall 2020 to fall 2021 to sort of reflect on the fact that I really do feel trans and I really am a feminine person. And through that, I kind of just, it was kind of like a whirlwind and it feels like a blur just because of the pandemic. So like, it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly how it happened, but I just really allowed myself to be open and I connected with the other Black queer people in my school. And it was a small group of us, but I especially connected with a Black trans masc and a Black non-binary person. And through that, we kind of just collected together and really shared our existence as Black trans people. And through that, we just really connected. And once we came back in person last fall, it was when I sort of like really started like, I came out to my parents and I, really tried existing with as my truest self and like my gender expression, makeup, clothing, and all that sort of thing. And through that, I kind of basically shoved people out the way and said, I'm making space for myself. I'm living my life. And I don't really care if this is a small school. I don't care. I wanted to be who I was. And I forced people to like accept me as I am. And it doesn't matter what I was before the pandemic. It doesn't matter like, oh, in 2019, I was such a different person. It doesn't matter any of that. What matters is that this is who I am and this is my truest self. And so I forced everyone to allow space for me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So much of our experiences is projected to be tied to violence against our bodies and people, whether people are intentionally doing so or not. Can you share how important has fighting queer or trans chosen family been in your tradition or overall livelihood? And this is a question for everybody. Could y'all hear me?
Yeah.
No. My thing keeps saying I'm muted for some reason. I don't know. Technically,
I grew up with a really Caribbean religious family. And my first exposure to, I want to say queerness, right? Because also I grew up in a cult. So that's another thing. So my first exposure to just queerness in general was through the depiction of trans women on the Jerry Springer and Murray show. Also, I'm a bit older. So I grew up growing up in the late 80s, early 90s was very, it wasn't as politically correct as things are now. I would say that. So having that being my first experience, and then I would hear family members say the off the cuff things, and I just didn't know any better. I didn't know anything. So once I graduated high school and I was done with the familial obligation, I packed a bag and I left. And when I left, I started dancing. I just danced everywhere. I literally danced is what took me around the world. And I'll never forget the first show I auditioned for. Her name was Taina, and she was this Puerto Rican woman, and she was just phenomenal. I mean, she was at that time when I think about what a trans woman, what a trans woman would be, I thought of Taina. And I met her at an audition, and we became friends until her last day. And it was just having that type of understanding, having that type of love, having that type of connection, I'll say was something that really saved my life because I was angry. I was an angry youth, I will say that. And none of that mattered to her. It was very much, let's celebrate our wins and let's just celebrate us in general. And yeah, the world may have thought she was, I guess to the standards of it now, she may have been someone who was dealing with a lot of mental health issues, right? But she was also someone who loved harder than I have ever had a family member love me. She's someone who would give you the shirt off of her back. She's someone who opened her house to people that she didn't even know and nurtured them. So I feel like a lot of times when I think of chosen families and I think of community, I try to emulate that. I try to be the nurturing women that I grew up with, the nurturing women that nurtured me, the women that loved me without even knowing my name, right? So just, yeah, I'm thankful for those experiences, because I know now in the society that we have now, in the time that we have now, while I will say growing up as trans back in the 90s was difficult, it also built a different type of trans woman. It built a very communal independence that is not seen a lot now. And that hurts my heart. It hurts my heart. And I'm emotional. I'm going to just get that out. And I tend to cry, but it is nothing. It is just how I am. So it hurts my heart in the way that society and the media shows us so much pain and so much, every time we turn around, we have another sister, another baby that's lost their life, right? And the banners go up and the names are said. yet and still we don't show what trans joy looks like. We don't show what trans resilience looks like. We don't show what just trans happiness looks like. We don't show what any of that looks like. We don't show what it looks like when a trans woman is past 35, because we're not slated to live past 34. So there's all these other things. And I learned these things from the women that I grew up around, from the women that plucked my first eyebrow, from the women that showed me how to tuck for the first time. I learned all of these things from women that some of them I don't even know their government names. And guess what? I don't want to, because I know them from the name that they told me. I don't know their dead names. I don't know any of these names. I know the names and I know the love that they showed me. And that is very much why I am the way I am when it comes to, me as an adult, as an older adult now, finding trans family and finding my sisters that I come in contact with. And it's why I love them the way that I love them. And it's why I fight for them the way that I fight for them, because I want them to know that there's so much more out there than just our pain and just a name on a shirt with a start and end date. I want them to know that trans joy, trans resilience, trans laughter is something that needs to fill the air and the space that we live in. I just want so much for us. And I know I pray eventually that it'll work out. And I'm hopeful for that. And I've taken up enough talking time.
Thank you for sharing. All I have is chosen family, like other than my mom and my two siblings. And my dad kind of, but it's the only aspect that's kind of stayed the same in my life, like in regards to family. They've always been there. They've always supported me. And they're the ones who, honey, I have dinners monthly. Like we have cute little parties at my house. And like my mom, she's mother to all. And I think like it's the only way I've survived is through my chosen family. I mean, I have chosen family all around the world now, and I'm so grateful for them. And I'll we FaceTime all the time. And it's really beautiful what chosen family has done for my life and for my transition to like learning makeup, some skills from other people, or like you said, learning how to tuck, same thing. Like honey, goodbye and good night. I don't know where I would have learned it. You know what I mean? You can't search it up on YouTube. Probably now you can, but like when I first was transitioning, girl, goodbye and good night. So they've been everything to me. And I've had some of them in my life for like 13 years. And I can't say the same for like blood. And so yeah, I'm very, very grateful for them.
Thank you both for sharing your story. Ro, you're speaking to my heart. I feel like I know you just based off of what you shared. Thank you, Ro. My queen mother is my guiding light. And I was fortunate enough that when I was that 18-year-old little person going to that club, sneaking in, I saw her performing and I realized, wow, she's gorgeous. And she's 6'3", and she's Samoan Chinese, and I'm Hawaiian Japanese. And we look alike, and everybody was like, look, it's a little her, right? And my mother's name was Madeline Ashton. So she's also in the pageant world and doing a lot of things. So when I became her daughter, I actually got a lot of her notoriety, her protection, her safety in the queen world. And that gave me a lot of reputation. I also gave me a sense of I want to make her proud, right? And I did have my mother and my father, but they were divorced. They couldn't understand none of the things that I was feeling and going through, but yet my queen mother could. She got her gender affirming surgery from Thailand when she was 30 years old. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my goal and my dream. I didn't get mine till I was 42. I can honestly say she's been in my life for every single step. While I went to prison, when I came out of prison, when I got my first job, my second job, my third job, with my silicone, my hormones. And then I went overboard, right? Because I also find my own identity. So I did more silicone than she approved of, but that was my decisions to make, right? So she supported me in my decision. That was important. I don't even remember a time when her and I had disagreed on things, but what she instilled in me is something that I can never get rid of in my head. She took in people into her home. She has like 14 other kids and they have kids. So she's a grandmama and a great grandmama, and all of them look at her with such respect. It was like no wonder why her and I both worked at that agency that I talked about. Her and I both did a lot of trans justice advocacy and work. It is because she already was my beacon of hope. So we wanted to give some of this ideas or safety for other folks too. And what better way than through nonprofit work where we can get funded to do this, dedicate our whole careers to it. And she's been my mother queen since I was 18, and I'm 45 come Saturday. So that's 27 years. She's been in my life longer than I've not known her. I've known her and looked up to her. When we worked together, we gymmed together, we did Zumba together, we did everything together, but we don't live together. She also lifted me up. I've never had another queen person in my life, sister, auntie, or any other person who wanted so much success for me, that fought for me when I was in college, let me cry to her when I was struggling, just basically getting by. She wanted me to succeed. She also wanted me to surpass her and do the things that she wasn't able to do. And for me, that's really speaking to my heart, that she's so selfless and as a mother really wanted me as her daughter to succeed. Well, when I left it, we both worked at that agency, and then 16 years later, I now work at Trans Justice Funding Project in New York. It was a hard bet to leave my local community work and turn for completely national. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't know that she could do it, because she now took my place. She never had a problem that her daughter was her director. Never. That's how supportive she is. We worked together as a team. It never was a moment of jealousy or that type of thing. When she's running the pageant, I'm her biggest hype person. I'm the one screaming, passing out fans and everybody to yell and make noise for my mother queen, but she didn't need none of that hyping up because she already had so much love from the community. So I bring her into this space honestly as my guiding light, and honestly as my whole purpose of in queen life, what I learned. Ro was right. It was different coming up in the 80s and 90s, and learning the trans world. Um, you had to rely on sisters, and if you ain't got no friends, it's difficult. So we choose our family based off who was there for you and who's got your back. Nowadays, I don't see so much of that. Sometimes it's a little bit different. It hurts my heart too when I see, you did what, girl? You slept with her man just because you could, because you wanted to show everybody she ain't shit. I'm like, that was a whole wrong reason of doing anything. So I see the way how folks are competitive. I see how folks got to make theirs bigger, better, and better than everybody else. And that's not the reason to do things for yourself. So I look at it as I'm very grateful for the chosen family I have who guided me and made me the best that I could be, and not use competition or fear or anger to drive us, give us love, and loved us all so that we can thrive. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing today. This has been real and the kind of magic we need to create everywhere with our girls. As we wrap up, because I know we started a little late, but it's about that time. As we wrap up, we have our closing question. First of all, thank you everyone for underlining why we need to keep our agenda connected to our roots and how much chosen family played a role in our transition, especially as we see anti-trans bills being introduced across the US and this new wave of generation the girls, and how we are different, but definitely what we can learn from each other, and take the mistakes that our older generation might have and let that we don't have to go through the struggles that they went through for us that we don't have to face, and acknowledging that and taking it and really just being thankful for how far we come. Moving forward, where should the movement for trans liberation prioritize our energy?
When I think of the movement for trans liberation, there's a lot of pleading for others to see our humanity that I see and I've noticed. And I really just want us to notice our own humanity. I want us to understand our own worth first. Our worth first. And I just want us to understand that outside opinions and perspectives have nothing to do with us and who we are intrinsically. And it's up to them if they want to experience this. But for us, I just want us to get everything that they say we can have. I want us to take everything by the horns and just ride it. Go as high as we can. If school is your thing, get as many degrees as you can. If it's not, that's fine too. But do what makes you happy at the end of the day. I want us to show what trans joy and trans happiness looks like, because they are insistent on showing us what trans pain looks like. They're insistent on letting us know that sex work is the only job that we can get. And I understand, as someone who has done sex work for an extremely long time, I understand that barriers are set in place. And I'm not going to say but, I'm going to say and. I want the girls to know, and I want the theys and the thems to know, and the he's and the hises to know that that's not the only route that we can have. There is so much more out there for us, and it's up to us to go after it, because no one's going to give it to us. So we got to snatch that like we snatch trophies at a ball, baby. We just got to go and take up the space and take up space. And that's just what I want for us. I love all of us dearly. They'll hate us without even knowing our names. And I make sure that I love all of us without even knowing names. And it was a pleasure taking up space with y'all today.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Toby.
So I think there's a lot, but I think we first need to focus on ourselves. I think as trans femmes, I think we should just liberate ourselves from what everything says that we're supposed to be. And I think that we should, honestly, I think we need to understand ourselves and our relationship with gender for ourselves. And I think that we shouldn't be afraid to experience every single part of our gender, and we should be able to exist and just allow ourselves to experience the truest form of ourselves. And if that means hyperfemininity, that means hyperfemininity. If that means gender fluidity, then that means gender fluidity. I think we shouldn't box ourselves in, and especially just focusing on like passing, because I think that passing, it's good for our safety, but is it really good for our mental health if we're just only focusing on how can I pass the most? Because I think you should be in the environment where you can exist as yourself. And if that means going to balls, and that means, everything, I think we should be in the place where we can exist as ourselves and not focus on passing 24/7, because I don't think that's what's best for every trans girl, because not every trans girl wants to pass but feels like they have to. So I think we should just be ourselves and try and balance what we want for ourselves and our gender expression with our safety.
I think I just want to kind of piggyback on both of those. Bro, you said it exactly. Trans happiness, trans joy, and for me, that's community. So I think for trans liberation, what I always say is community work will do more than a law ever will. And there's so much beauty and so much power in the people who are doing the law changing work and getting into government and all that. But for me, we need to prioritize the people in our community, the kid in the corner who doesn't know themselves, the person over there who is looking to find themselves. That is where I want to prioritize our energy and our love and our care, because at one point I was that kid who was trying to find themselves. and I didn't have a GSA or I didn't have a space to go to, especially being a youth. Like, I mean, in Denver, we have the center, but like, that's all the way down on Colfax. Like, goodbye and good night. That's like downtown, and that's 20, 30 minutes away from me, and that's an hour and a half bus ride. Like, it's not accessible to a lot of communities, especially a Black and brown community like Montbello, where I live. So it's about bringing those spaces into our communities. And there's way more trans people than people think there are. There are way more gender diverse people than people think there are. And, you know, we need to cultivate a culture and a community for them, because I know I didn't have it. So I'm trying to build that for other people. And I'm trying to have it for other people. And that love and that care and that joy that we can create is where our energy should really be prioritized.
Thank you all for sharing everything that was already in my heart. So thank you all. My message also would be love yourself and to be kind to yourself and others. Because if in a world where everybody's against us, we need to be there for each other with community. Also, to not look at each other as competition or jealousy when someone gets something that you want. But when one of us gains success, I wrote this down here. When one of us gains success, then we all win too. That's that beacon of hope that I'm talking about. That's the, I can't see her, so I can't be her. And we also need people to lift us up and allow us to pass us, right? And with that being said, we want to support each other. Success is our, in their future is our success also. But I also want to say, where the movement lies, as a person who's like ready to top out and just retire with my little fur babies, I'm like, make space for other leaders. There needs to be more voices. When you're at the table and you realize that you're the only one at the table, something's wrong. Make space for more people to come and say. And also know we don't always gotta agree, but we always have to be lifting each other up and finding space for us to find success. And that success is gonna look so different. But also know when it's time to pass the torch, when it's time to give all your knowledge and your information, because the future generation is the one that's going to win and they're the one that's going to succeed us. But if we don't give the things that we've learned in our lifetime, then we making them start from scratch. Or you're not even lifting them up and helping them find their way. So our purpose really is to just lift the next generation. And I can tell you by the next 20 or 30 years, we're going to be exactly where we're supposed to be, you know? So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. The girls have talked, and I have learned so much today, and really just want to highlight that. This will be the end of our conversation. Okay. No, I can't want to be in the call. But this has been such a great conversation. Thank you all for coming today. I will be sending emails to all of y'all. Thank y'all for coming. And yeah, the girls have talked. And I hope everybody has a great day. I know it's earlier for some than others. Some is later, but yeah, thank you for coming.